All right, good afternoon. The Rancho Public Schools Board of Education meeting for Monday, May 6, 2024 is now called to order. If all please arise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, JC, can you do a roll call for us?
President Galbraith,
Present.
Vice President Morgan,
Present.
Secretary Tyler, Board Member Tripp,
Present.
Board Member Miller.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And we'd like to welcome everyone out to our special meeting today as we go over some budget things. And we'll start off today. Sorry, I'm trying to pull all my things out. We'll go ahead and start off today with some introductory comments by the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Visu Cleveland.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. So today's board meeting is a special budget session, and we'll be talking about our allocation from the state. As most people know, the vast majority of our money comes directly from the state of New Mexico. And we have one of the most highly centralized educational systems in the United States. Funding remained constant in our budget allocation this year. However, the costs went up significantly. Many of these costs were mandated by the state. They include things such as mandatory salary increases, mandatory increases in property and liability insurance. And I was told those increases are coming from two sources. One is that I was aware of, the other I was not. Apparently there was a major hailstorm that hit the eastern part of our state last year, and it has wreaked havoc on the insurance dollars that we have in the pool. And then mandatory increases in employer matched health, vision, and dental insurance. So the employees see an increase, and the districts also see an increase. And all of those are decided in the legislative session. They are not decided locally. In addition, we have seen significant cost increases for special education in our district, and we have seen an increase in the percentage of children with disabilities in our district. So specifically at the request of the Public Education Department, we went to an extended school year last year through the K-12 Plus initiative, and we had that conversation with the board, talked about what programs we would be able to provide and what the incentives were and what the financial benefits were. This year, funding that would have held harmless those districts who were the early adopters was moved in the budget, and it's believed that the funding was moved to save for the districts that did not have a 180-day calendar yet. So that was not anticipated, and I don't know that when that was done, there was an understanding of what that might mean to school districts. But we have a lot of districts still in New Mexico that do not have a 180-day calendar. As you know, there's a lawsuit that's going on about that very issue right now. But we are not the only district that was hurt by this, and I'll mention that in just a moment. But we did see some revenue loss when that funding was moved to handle the 180-day calendar issue. And then we have had a decrease in student enrollment. We have followed up as to why we think we had that change in particularly elementary schools. And the feedback we have received from parents is due primarily to two things: elementary school start times, especially the later time, and also the behavior of some of our highest needs students. And so we've looked at both of those, and we'll be talking with you about how we hope to address some of those concerns. So some of the things that have been going on, just so to kind of bring you up to speed on what we have been doing, we contacted the Legislative Education Study Committee, who of course was the architect of the K-12 Plus initiative. We have spoken with the Legislative Finance Executive Director and also representative from the Governor's Office. We also, as I shared last time, had a meeting with the public education department, and we have not heard back from that meeting as of yet. Tomorrow morning, superintendents from Las Cruces, Santa Fe, Gadsden, Hobbs, and myself will speak with the governor's office representative, and all of the districts will be sharing the impact that their funding losses will have on their districts this year. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about this at a time when the state has ample reserves. So really confused and frustrated over why we would see reductions when there is no shortage of funding from the state. We will also have a representative from the Legislative Finance Committee here in Rio Rancho tomorrow and be visiting with our finance folks to go over and look at some of the things in the budget, but particularly those things related to K-12 plus and out-of-school time funding. And we've had people ask, how do you get a change in this given the shortfalls in many districts? The one thing that could be done right now, could be done just tomorrow, would be a decision to push out more of the already budgeted SEG, just push it out. And then if there's a shortfall, try to address it in the legislative session in January. That seems to be the easiest because the money's already there and already budgeted. But anything other than that would require going back to the legislature. The executive branch doesn't have any authority just to change the budget. The budget is an appropriation from the New Mexico legislature. And so that's very difficult because the legislature would have to come back into session to address that change. And as you know, we have a special session coming up, but it's not directed toward educational issues at all. We are attempting to meet with our legislative delegation on Friday, and so far I think we've been able to contact all of them, and we have to have a second meeting for one, but we're needing them to look at the situation that we're dealing with right now, and more importantly, how we're going to fix that so that we're not back here doing the same thing again a year from now. And honestly, I don't think anyone knows exactly how this happened. Never quite seen anything like this. We've had budget reductions before over the years, and they've been hard, but it's always when there was a loss of revenue, when oil and gas went down, when we lost revenue from that sector, or the Great Recession, or other times. Never had that situation when there is ample reserves in Santa Fe. So got to figure out what happened and why. And it seems to have hit the medium-sized districts harder than any other group. Though Albuquerque says they don't have their numbers completed yet. They're still trying to compile it. They're so large and they have so many programs and so many variables. So they're not exactly sure where they are right now. Okay, and then there's some things, it's, as I said, the public ed department is holding back funding. And a lot of folks, so why are they doing that? Obviously, when it's short, when districts are short, and they are anticipating that it's going to be needed, as I said previously, to for the 180 days. So for the districts that don't have it, if they go to 180 days, they're going to have more units, and they're going to need more money in order to accomplish that. And so this is what we heard at one of the spring budget workshop presentations. That was the reason for holding back. The overall increase was about 5% for the state budget. They released about 3.2%. So there's still some funding put back. All of it's probably not earmarked for school districts, but we know that some of it is. And many do believe that it's they're holding back too much and that it would be better if they distributed more. Last year, the public ed department held back some money, but they didn't hold enough back. And so you're always in that push and pull, and they kind of got beat up over the fact that they had to go back and ask for additional money. So I think this time they're trying to be more cautious, more careful, but that's resulting in a shortfall in many districts. And so, again, we are hoping that if they would release more of that money, if there is a shortfall, that they could cover it in the next session in January. And another option would be to ask the governor to put it on the call for the special session but we've been told by a lot of sources that's not likely to happen. The session is really geared toward crime and public welfare kinds of issues, and really don't, they really don't think she's willing to do that, and also concerned about the excuse me, I've got a really bad sore throat. Legislators who are already going to have to go up for a meeting that's going to be very hard for their work schedules, their family was not planned, and so they want to keep that session just as short as they possibly can. And, I think you've heard at school board association meetings, and we hear at superintendent meetings and other public education meetings, the issue of accountability, and we certainly understand that and support that. But accountability, in order to be fair, has to have some program stability, and it's not possible when you have these swings back and forth. So you start programs, so those programs are working and they're doing good things for kids, but you end up having to terminate them because you don't lack the funding, even when they are working. And I can give you an example of some of the things that we've been doing. They're going to be very hard now to fund. Would be things like, take at the secondary level, credit recovery, tutoring, our Saturday classes, some of our summer programs, middle school partnership with Boys and Girls Club. Those kind of things we're not going to have the resources for that. And those worked very well for us. We don't have the numbers yet, but we're getting very close. We're not going to have many students, thankfully, that don't walk across the line for graduation. I mean, very small number. And these programs help make that happen. Elementary also has had some wonderful programs that they put in, and we've seen some real success for that. We're going to be doing a commendation for Maggie Cordova for their archery club. There's been a lot of clubs and activities for students at the elementary level. There's not going to be funding for that now. And so accountability has to work both ways. And we've got to have that assurance of sustained funding when we put these programs in, and you just can't start and stop programs and think they're going to work. So that's a frustration. We're looking at other ways of looking at addressing revenue, and we'll be talking this evening about facility use agreement fees, which facilities and finance are recommending to be increased. We know we all hate that. We want people to use our buildings. We want them to be accessible. But we're not going to be able to take that money out of classrooms. And so we'll be talking with the board about the possibility of increasing facility use agreement fees. And it is one of the agenda items you'll be looking at this evening. And then last, but certainly not least, we have a Clear Channel billboard license agreement, and we're excited about that. This will allow for the construction of billboard sites on our property at 3 different locations. And the agreement really clearly defines standards for the advertising content. And also we would have some access to billboards for advertising for some of the really good things that are going on in our district, which we would love to share with the community. And then the maintenance procedures and location sites are generally specified in the agreement as well. And the agreement is for 5 years with an option for one single extension of 5 more years before it would have to come back to the board for another renewal. And the anticipated annual revenue to start is about $75,000 for the first year. So that's exciting, and we've been working on this for a really long time, and we think it'd be a really good partnership and would benefit both of us. We would both come out really strong winners in this license agreement. And then just a brief update on the 180-day lawsuit. As you know, we're not party to this lawsuit. And it is against the New Mexico Public Education Department. And we did not get involved in the lawsuit because our students already attend 180 school days per year. Albuquerque also chose not to. Las Cruces didn't. Primarily the larger districts, because the focus has been pretty much on the smaller districts. But it will affect us indirectly as we discuss the budget due to the amount of state equalization guarantee that is being withheld from being distributed until this issue is resolved. And the judge did issue a temporary injunction last Friday against the public ed department. Again, about 2/3 of the districts are plaintiffs in the lawsuit. And we're watching it very carefully as we see how it develops. But it does impact us indirectly. And hearing has been set for a week from today in Clovis, and it'll be interesting to see how that lawsuit pans out. But it's if they win the lawsuit or to get the injunction, then it's possible, I don't know that it's guaranteed, but it's possible those extra units would go back into the general fund that would be used for distributing across the state. So again, we don't know for sure that's what would happen, but it's a possibility, and that would increase the distribution for the districts. If they lose it and they have to go to 180 days, then those districts will generate considerably more units, and those units will have to be paid for out of that budget line. And that means there will not be as much held back that will be available for distribution to the remaining districts. Again, about 2/3 of the districts are involved in this lawsuit. And it's mainly the smaller districts in New Mexico that have been party to it. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
Questions from anyone?
No.
Questions from anyone? Okay. I do have a comment. I think in that 180 days, I'm kind of curious if they do win it, which I don't know if they will. I just felt like they kind of held captive their funds, they gave us more if we went to, anyway, I kind of wonder if they'll continue to do those things and make it really difficult for everyone not to have 180 days is my guess.
Yeah, and it's just an interesting lawsuit. The governor has taken the position that it's school districts are trying to evade accountability. That was her quote in the paper. The school districts say it's very hard in rural areas to recruit staff for 5 days a week, and 4 days helps them be able to staff their schools, which is a real challenge for them. And so it will be very interesting. The governor has indicated that she plans to strongly fight the lawsuit. So hopefully we will know the funds, as you said, are sitting there waiting until this is decided. So it impacts every school district in our state. But there are certainly strong arguments on both sides of the issue.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Any other?
Nope, I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
I'm so sorry. The cotton has gotten me, and I am
know.
just about to die of it.
I know.
Thank you.
It is bad. All right, we'll go to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. We have a motion.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, I make a motion to approve prioritize agenda and proposed time allocation.
Board Member Gary Tripp, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jeff Morgan and a second by Gary Tripp. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries 4-0. Okay, now for our public comment. So we don't have any in-person public comment, correct? We don't have any in-person public comment, but we did receive a good amount on our public comment form on our webpage. Because when I receive a lot about one topic, we just summarize that large amount that we received. And please note that everyone is welcome to come in and give in-person public comment if that disappoints you. So please do come in. But we received, 23, is that right? 23. And 20 of those were in regards to Puesta del Sol, asking for us to find some different ways with our early education or early childhood education in Puesta del Sol. Then we received 2 that were on our budget, and those 2 I'd like to summarize. We have one from Alyssa Kramer, and especially since we're talking budget today. One is in regards to, which we were just talking about, is our youth sports in the within our city, them liking that them asking if we could have more time for our youth sports programs throughout the city to be able to use Rio Rancho Public Schools facilities. That they've been disappointed in the support for some of our local programs. Our second one is a question by Trishwana Smith, asking if the upcoming year will have a budget for field trips for students. And then our last public comment was just in regards to our, I don't even know how to summarize it, into our board not being very charismatic. So that was, I'm like, I'm not sure quite how to, they're probably watching me try to figure out how to summarize that one. So, all right. So with that, that's our public comment. We'd like to remind everyone once again that you're welcome to come in and give public comment inside the boardroom. You're also it's also great if you go to our board page and give public comment there. Moving into our next item is our consent agenda. If we want to go ahead and approve that.
Board Member Gary Tripp, I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, a second.
We have a motion by Gary Tripp and a second by Jeff Morgan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Any opposed?
Oh, you kind of.
All right, motion carries 4-0. I was waiting for you guys for just a moment. Maybe meetings at 4:00 is just a little difficult for everyone. All right, we'll go into business. So now for our business, our first item is to consider the approval of the 25-24 fiscal year budget. So we have Mike Baker, our Chief Operations Officer, along with David Vigil, our Executive Director of Finance, and Heather Gabaldon, our Director of Finance, who will be presenting this to us.
Okay, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board. So I will likely give a very uncharacteristic.
Charismatic.
Thank you.
You can't even see it.
Yeah, talk about budget. But so here we go. So some of these numbers that I will go over fairly quickly, we've gone over in our finance committee meeting on April 12th and April 29th. Most of the numbers are fairly similar. Some of it we've tweaked a bit, and I'll go over some of those changes. But I think Dr. Cleveland certainly painted the overall picture of the budget environment for Rio Rancho and where it resides from the legislature and PED. But on the total revenue, as you are aware, most of our revenue comes from our SEG. And so we have an SEG estimate, SEG meaning State Equalization Guarantee. And essentially that is the funding that comes from PED, from the legislature. The estimated amount is approximately $215 million. So as of this date, we do not have our 910B5 form, which means that we don't have the exact number that is coming from PED. But David did the estimate. He used their worksheet, plugging in the numbers that we believe are true. So that number 215 should be pretty close. Other sources of revenue is basically all the other forms of revenue, and you can see quite a stark difference to our SCG. The estimate there is approximately $2 million. And then this evening, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about our beginning fund balance. And because of what we believe what we know is a reduction in our revenue for the 24-25 fiscal year, it's the beginning fund balance of just under 29 million that I say is saving our bacon this year. And so because of that, we're not having to make drastic cuts, although we've seen some significant cuts from PED. On the expenditure side, we plan on spending approximately $246 million. Most of that, as you know, is salary and benefit, over $187 million. 62 million make up the rest of the budget, essentially in department costs, to include the school's discretionary fund. We still don't have our transportation numbers. Although I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago, they said they would have them in 2 days. We still don't have those numbers. So we believe due to change in legislation and increased ridership, that we would receive approximately $2 million more. That is our best guess. It's unfortunate that we don't have that number. And then we'll talk about this department reductions. So when I use the term reductions, I want to be very clear what that term means. What we didn't do is we didn't take this year's budget or the 23-24 budget and reduced that amount. What a budget department reduction means in this sense is all the departments project what they will need for the 24-25 fiscal year. And then we went through those numbers and we reduced their 24-25 ask. Okay. So we'll go over in detail what those reductions are. And generally speaking, all departments saw an increase in their 24-25 budget as you compare it to the 23-24 budget. So that term reduction, you just understand that they're not necessarily seeing reduced funding from this fiscal year. You could see the difference between revenue and expenditure. We're at zero or balanced budget. As we go down into the gray area, we talked about this in some detail in the Finance Committee meeting, that we have mandatory budget additions of $8.4 million. I'm not going to go into detail there unless you would like me to. And then some of the major budget initiatives. Originally, we talked about this payroll creep thing, and it really is creepy to the budget. We were hoping to take care of it this fiscal year. We've decided to kick the can down the road, so to speak, until next fiscal year, unless the financial picture changes at mid-year. So we took that out of the budget at $5.3 million. We're looking at having a potential transportation deficit, if we get that $2 million, maybe of about $300,000, which is a far cry from what we've experienced in years past. We've eliminated the internship program at a savings of approximately $1.1 million. But we also, at the bottom of the major budget initiatives, we're adding the teacher residency program for a net increase of $440,000. Going back into the middle of that form, or line 31, we've increased special education teachers by 13 for an added cost of approximately $1.2 million. However, we decreased GE teachers by 12 for a savings of approximately $1.1 million. We've added 18 special ed teachers for a cost of approximately $760,000, but we've decreased general ed EAs by approximately $380,000. So there's the major budget additions and subtractions. Moving over to the reduction tab.
Question?
Yes.
I don't understand the decrease of general education teachers.
Go back if you can. So this particular fiscal year, we saw a decrease of 553 students in enrollment. And over the course of 5 years, we have a decline of approximately 860 students. So, and typically the way the projections or the allocations work is we project how many students, what grade, what school, and we take the state proportions and we simply put I say simply, it's not, it's anything but simple.
Right.
But, for example, we'll take the teacher-student ratios and we plug in the mandatory numbers that the state requires, teacher per student. And so the spreadsheet has all those numbers. We put the projections and it gives us what those projections are. We do the same thing with special ed. Special ed is a bit more subjective in that some of our highest needed students require more than what the state basically dictates. So basically, Jerry goes through that, and he goes through the students, and he says, I know that this student, for example, is medically fragile, and therefore we need maybe 2 EAs to assist or something to that effect. So that's why the numbers ebb and flow. So this going into next year, we see a decrease of general ed students, but we see an increase of special ed students. And unfortunately, our special ed numbers are increasing where our general ed numbers are decreasing. And so with that, we adjust our staff.
So when I look at the enrollment from 2019 all the way to today on 40, 80th, and 120th, the day counts, I see the decrease of 600 students. But when I look at schools individually, I only see a handful of students. So when we're reducing teachers, I don't see that equation. I also know that we've added other positions outside of teaching positions, and that's not on the decrease. So I guess I understand what you're saying about the classroom and the student-teacher ratio, but when, for example, the only school that has had a significant drop, if I'm reading it right, is Cyber Academy. They've had a drop of 50 students, I think, over a year and a
That's
half.
probably our elementary one that we closed.
What,
There's different forms
right.
in regard to student enrollment.
I'm looking at the 120th, 40th, 80th day counts from 10/19 all the way to 12/23.
In the budget document?
Yes. Yeah.
So
And
Yeah, let's go over that in our projections. I am talking about overall numbers, but you're right, we do have each school numbers, and we have the 40, 80, 120 day counts, and then we also have the MEM. And so David is going to actually go over the MEM, or the membership. And that's what we get paid on, is actual student enrollment.
right.
So, I mean, those numbers have to match up somewhere. So we've lost 553 students. So, I mean, so whether or not we're seeing them. Yeah. Okay.
But don't forget, when you look at Shining Stars,
Mm-hmm.
Shining Stars, the students are a 0.5, not a 1. So a lot of times when we're looking at numbers, those numbers skew because typically you're looking at Shining Star as a 1 when they're a 0.5, because the students go there a half a day. So they're counted as a 0.5.
Okay. Do you want to continue to go into it, Gary, and then you can ask some more questions on it? That way they can show. I think does this document should help as we look through the actual.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think we can be teachers.
I mean, Gary, I don't think that they're looking at our actual student enrollment. So it's not cutting teachers based off of like, let's make our classrooms bigger. That we should still have the same classroom ratios that we always have correct? We should have, our classroom ratio should stay approximately the same. It's just that we have a decreasing enrollment. And so therefore, we will not have as many teachers. I don't think we're getting rid of teachers necessarily. It'll probably be a natural.
We're not anticipating loss of any teacher positions within the district. I don't think anyone needs to be worried about that. But Board Member Tripp makes a good point about two things. And one is that when you lose students, you lose them all over the district. And so it's a few here, a few here, a few here. And it makes it very hard then to look at the staffing in the school because it doesn't always add up to one teacher. And that makes it hard to not have those overloads. The others, we've worked very hard the last several years to get under the state numbers, maximum numbers, but they are still high. For example, we've had that discussion today. Middle schools are 32. That's what they're staffed for. Too high, and but we are also looking at a huge cut in the revenue for the district. But we don't anticipate it looking very differently. I would also want to add, because I think it's we're looking at cutting. Why are we putting 400 and some thousand into residents? And that's because we are short special ed teachers, desperately short special education teachers. And when you don't have teachers, you end up with compensatory payments and other things. So we need those teachers. The others that we had already made a commitment to the University of New Mexico and don't want to be in a position like we're dealing with in another situation of not honoring the commitment we've already made to them. And so, but we need those teachers desperately in special ed. In exchange for that extra, that we put in, they owe us 3 full years of employment after they graduate. So special ed, our numbers are going up. We've got to find ways to staff those classrooms. And this is one of the ways that we know that we can do it. For the non-special ed residency teachers, they do not cost the district anything. And we have a good number of them in all of the other areas. But special ed, we are matching what the Albuquerque Public School District is doing, and that's paying the full salary in order to get them in that residency program for that first year. So I want you to be aware of what that's buying as you look at whether you want to approve the budget or not. But it will bring us additional special education teachers. And it's not a challenge for us. That's a challenge across the state and everywhere across the country. But that's why that residency amount is high. And the board can decide whether you want to keep that or not. But we did make a commitment to the University of New Mexico. But as you can see, we're going up we're going to have more teachers for special education because those numbers are growing. And not only the numbers are growing, but the severity of the children who are coming to us with disabilities is greater than it's been in the past. So it's kind of a two-pronged that we're trying to address in that residency program for the University of New Mexico. Okay. Did that help at all, the comments? Okay.
That was helpful. Thank you.
The bottom line is our PTRs are too high, and we know it, but we've been working hard over several years to bring them down. And this is going to be a kind of a blip in our efforts to do that. But we are still planning to stay under the state numbers whenever possible. And if after 2 years you don't do that, then there are consequences for the school district, financial ones. So we try very hard to stay under. Ironically, that 32 at the middle school level is allowed under the state because they allow 160 students to be assigned to a teacher. But you should never have 32 in a middle school
32.
classroom.
Yeah, 32 is hard to do.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so moving to reductions. And so let me say this too. So you all have access to the budget binder, these forms. And so if you want to go back, you have access to that. And I know it's been some time, and I know Board Member Miller, you haven't had an opportunity to enjoy these spreadsheets, but we'll be here afterwards, or at your choosing, we'd be helpful to help you navigate, or anybody else to navigate the budget worksheets and the budget document as well.
Thank you.
So on the On the reductions, you can see in the A column, the department. And then when you look at the E column, you can look at the actual dollar value. The F column is the adjusted budget. And then the G column is the budget increase. Some cases it may be a decrease. And so just to highlight some of the departments, even though there was a reduction in the projection of fine arts did have a 6% increase. Athletics, a 9% increase. Counseling went up over 100%. CNI elementary, 70%. CNI secondary, 114%. CTE, not the teachers, but CTE decreased 18%. Diverted match down 3%. Federal programs, although it says 40%, it was actually moving salary from one area to the other, but essentially the program is flat. Ed tech down 3%. School improvement up 67%, and one of the reasons for that is summer programs and another program. Special ed increased 2%. Facilities down 6%, IT up 61%. The reason largely is due to construction or the fiber optic program, and then security went up 7%, and that essentially is the Evolve system. So even though there were reductions to budget, overall, we did see almost a 25% increase in the 23-24 budget to the 24-25 budget. Some of the bigger items where we started with the budget, if you look on row 18, we took out $1 million of instructional material, and that's because we don't have the expensive adoptions going into the 24-25 year. In the beginning, I did put in there for $2.5 million of out-of-school time. PE, or I should say, the legislature cut that program. And then typically we like to have a bit more than 1% reserve. We cut that by just under 1.8 million for a total of about 8.8 million in reductions. So moving to,
I think Claudia's having a problem for a second. Is it okay, Claudia, over there?
I can keep it on and continue.
Okay.
and you go to,
Quotation?
yeah.
I was trying to figure it out.
No, you're good.
Okay, so moving over to the next tab, I'll hand it off to David to go over some of those particulars.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, President Galbraith, members of the board, Dr. Cleveland. We'll briefly go over just the revenue and how what is comprised of. We talked a little bit about state equalization guarantee, the SEG, and how it makes up 99% of what we use for our operational budget. Again, as Mr. Baker presented, it is right around 215 million. That is based on right now the 190-day calendar, including 180 instructional days, and then the 10 professional development days that's built into the calendar. So again, this is an estimate of what the state has provided or will be providing. We don't have a final document from them yet. We have the federal flow through indirect costs. So for a lot of our federal grants, we get an administrative cost that we assign to those grants, and so we're able to use that to supplement the administrative costs of those federal programs. So we've estimated that to be about $500,000 for next year. We are also estimating about $900,000 in interest income, and We're in favorable interest rate for savings programs right now, so we're able to invest some of our reserves and earn interest on that money. Facility use agreements pull in about $250,000, and we'll be talking a little bit more about facility use agreements a little later. Our pilot program, our payment in lieu of taxes, was generate about $300,000 for the district, and then another $50,000 in other fees, for a total projected revenue of 217 million, excuse me. Again, this does not include our beginning fund balance of $27 million that Mr. Baker talked about earlier. We can get into enrollment and Mr. Tripp, this may answer some questions for you as well. But when we talk about funded enrollment, we can look at the 40, 80, and 120 figures individually, but what we get funded on is the average from the 80 and 120 day numbers. And so typically the 40-day membership enrollment numbers are higher than the 80 and the 120. And so what PED does in statute, they're required to take the average of the 80 and 120 day counts and average those for the calculation of the SEG. And so you can see here, if we scroll down to well, you can see the graph here. You can see that the district is on a declining enrollment kind of a trend here, with the caveat that in 2021 and 2022 school year, those numbers were based on the prior year, which was the COVID year. And so you can see a significant decrease there, but otherwise, you can see that we are in a declining membership environment right now. So as we mentioned earlier, a total of 860.75 students have been the decrease since 2020 and 2021. That is a 5% decrease in enrollment overall over the past 5 years. And from last year to this current year, we've lost 573 students, or 3.4% of our enrollment. So just in terms of dollars, given the current unit value that has been set by the PED right now, 573 students equates to about $7 million in decreased revenue for the district. So as we move on, we want to talk about the out of school time program. As Mr. Baker mentioned earlier, and Dr. Cleveland spoke about this earlier too, there was some revenues that were built into the SEG formula for this current school year that allowed for an out of school time program that was funded through the SEG formula. And that was a supplement to the K-12 plus program that was provided for under last year's legislation. What that did is it generated about $9.7 million in additional program money through the SEG. What's really important to note is that out of school time funding in the SEG is not funded for next year. And so essentially $9.7 million that was generated for this year is not being generated for next year. And so the 9.7 million that's not generated, plus the declining MEM of around $7 million, provides the idea of where those declining revenues are coming from. And so it's important to note that because of these decreases that we are seeing in terms of revenue, Mr. Baker was very clear in mentioning how our fund balance is going to kind of, did you say save our bacon this year?
Yeah.
So
Save our bacon.
save our bacon. We're trying to be a little more charismatic. In addition to that fund balance, we want to talk a little bit about what goes into that fund balance. And so my colleague Heather Gabaldon will talk about the CARES money. and the implications there.
Good afternoon, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the board. So over the last 4 years, we've received a substantial amount of federal CARES money. I believe it was close to 28 million. Out of that 28 million, we ended up spending 5.2 million on salaries and benefits. These weren't new positions, just positions that were normally paid out of the operational fund. So they were operational expenses that we were able to pay for with federal CARES money. So again, it's $5.2 million, which helped to increase our fund balance in the operational fund. That $5.2 million is now budgeted again in the operational budget for next year. Actually, it's not 5.2 million. The 2 million that's being coded there this year is now will now be spent out of operational funds for next year. So that just helped contribute to our fund balance.
So if we can move back to the budget overview. So again, when we look into that up at the upper left green area on row 6 where it says beginning fund balance. So this year we have our beginning fund balance is by far the highest it's ever been. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is what Heather just alluded to, is that we had the opportunity to actually put some money into savings, as you will, by saving some of that money that we spend on personnel. It's in the budget, it's in the operational budget, but we had an opportunity to basically take those funds and put it in our beginning fund balance. In addition to that, in the beginning of the fiscal year, we had some construction money, specifically the larger amount for CTE that will be carried over. And then, of course, we have our vacancy savings. So that's kind of behind that big number, approximately $28 million, where we generate that. And also, typically, departments don't spend 100% of their budget. And so when they don't spend 100% of that budget gets put back into the next fiscal year budget. So I think with that, we'll stand for questions.
I kind of have a comment. I was just thinking about this beginning fund balance. So I know we're in a lot of talks with different people trying to get these numbers up for this year, even for this coming school year. But I mean, what are we going to look like at the next school year if that doesn't happen? We're not going to have this beginning fund balance. I know this isn't exactly with what we're, with our budget for this coming, but have we been looking at that and what that might look like?
Well, that's a very good point. And that, I think, is the bigger concern is the 25-26 fiscal year.
Yeah.
And so because we budget on an annual basis, we are, looking at this year and thinking, okay, it's the beginning fund balance that's saving our baking. But that's one of the reasons why Dr. Cleveland has been in constant communication with the state, not necessarily for this year, but more for next year. And that, it appears right now, that appears to be really the troublesome issue. Hopefully they'll get it fixed, as you will. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I was looking at it, I'm like, this is going to be a mess if we in a couple of years it's going to be really bad. So
could be, but we'll see.
Okay, all right. Beth Miller, do you have any questions or comments?
Not really any specific questions, but just appreciate your work on all this. And I too had the same concern. What's going to happen down the road with this fund balance, and especially, I don't know. I'm hoping that this situation will be resolved in the next year, but part of me says it probably won't, to some degree. So I think you're going to have some challenges for the next 3 years here, as you probably have for the last many years. So, but I hope that our legislators truly understand understand the condition that our school districts are put under when these kinds of mandates are put out. So I commend the superintendent also for getting with other superintendents and contacting the state and working with them so that they really kind of understand what it is that their maybe unintended consequences are causing our school districts. But thank you for your work, all of you. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to Gary Tripp and we'll come down this.
Go ahead.
I'm going to try to clarify myself with an example,
I
if that's
understood
okay.
you better. I think, than Dr. Cleveland talked, but go ahead.
But in 1990, I was an elementary principal. And that we had 903 students, and I had a half-time nurse and a half-time counselor. And we had one maintenance worker that worked on facilities. And so I was thinking more what you just said about 25, 26. How can we sustain, maybe? I'm trying to find the right word. How can we sustain salaries, administrative salaries, counselors, programs, district? I mean, those things that have made us a rich district with no fund balance to carry over next year. And so when I saw when I just saw that small list, I understand it, but I was thinking more about the future. If this continues, we'll start seeing a reduction of several $1 million of either programs or personnel in the future. And I think that's kind of the thing I think we all need to think about, because if we're not all on the same team, I think the biggest fight is the unit value, because it's already in law and it is already something that they could legally give each district, not just Rio Rancho, be fair to every district in the state. And if I'm speaking incorrectly, please help me, because I think we need to get together and see how we can sustain our high level, but everybody's fair level in future years. Yeah. So.
Did you want to
No,
respond?
let's go ahead,
You go to
and then
Jeff.
I would like to respond to a couple of
Okay.
those if I could.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and then we'll
Mike, you had talked about the department deductions. You was going to come back and review that. Did I miss that piece? You were going to give more detailed information about the department.
Yeah, we went over that on that reduction tab.
Okay.
Could you break
Well-
down what those increases are?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you were going to go over the details from what I understand. You said you would give us the details on that.
So yeah, so the details are on that worksheet. So if you go in column A, you'll see the departments.
Got it.
Column B, you'll see the 23-24 budget.
Got it.
Column C, you'll see the 24-25 request. Then you will see in D the requested increase. And then you will see the monetary reduction. Then in F, you'll see the new adjusted budget for 2024. And then in column G, you'll see the actual budget increase from the 23-24 to the 24-25 budget. And so I went through each department.
Are you trying to get maybe more what that looks like when they have those reductions and how that impacts? Is that what you're thinking? I'm just trying to get clarification if that's what you're looking at, what some of the reductions actually look like within that department. I think the good one, the federal programs, it's Suzanne's salary, right? That moved out. That's probably the biggest reduction in that one.
So I guess, these departments already know, they've submitted this request, just so I'm clear.
Yes.
That's the piece I was not very clear on, because
Okay,
I'm saying,
so,
they know that they're going to be getting less money? That's kind of what I was not clear on.
Okay, so the way, so the executive direction for the department, they will complete the zero-based budgeting forms for the 25-25 request. So they request what they need/want for the following fiscal year. And then they make a presentation, and then the finance team goes through that, compares it with years past. And when we're in a reduction mode like this particular year, we take a look at those requests in regard to other requests, in regard to our strategic plan, and then come up with these calculations. And so you'll see what those calculations are on this form.
Okay, so they are aware. That's what my main, okay. All right, that's what my main concern was.
Yeah. Anything else, Jeff? Any other questions? Okay, do you have anything else, Jeff? I don't want to cut you off.
Well,
That's good.
We can come back to you too if you want to think it over a little bit, and Dr. Cleveland can talk a little bit. We can go back to you.
yeah, let me come back, man.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I think, let me make some general comments, and then I think, for example, I think what we're wanting to know is for these increases, what are they getting for that? You know, what do those look like and why? And so going back to the previous page, and I'll just pick one, it's a small one, but one, for example, athletics is up 9%. Why? Well, primarily it's up 9% because with the redistricting, we now are going to play many of our games in Farmington. And we used to play them all in the metro area. And when the NMAA redistricted, we ended up with Farmington. And we like Farmington plenty, fine. I mean, they're a great district, but that's going to raise our transportation costs dramatically. So that's what that reflects. It's an increase in transportation. Counselors, we've had, I think, pretty clear direction from the board the last several years to improve the mental health and well-being of our children. And we added counselors another counselor at all of our elementary schools in order to meet those needs. So, I think maybe part of what they're looking for, what are those increases? What are they for and why? And I think that's really important for the community to know as well, that these are responding to board direction and directives and requests, and then some things are external. But I will say, for example, with counselors, we have seen a really large increase in our counseling services, but that's directly the result of more children with higher and higher needs, still not getting to all the children who need our help. So I don't know if you want to talk about a couple of the others, but I think it'd be very good for both the board and the community to know what those look like and what they're going for.
So Mike, can I give you one, CTE? I don't know if you went into the details on that one. I mean, that's one for, I know that's a big deal to us.
But just that it's down.
But it's now.
I mean, that's a very important initiative to us, but it's going to be down.
Right. So again, that's not the quote unquote school. That is the administrators that manage the CTE programs, throughout the district. What we can do, I mean, some of these things I have up here and some of them I don't.
Okay, right.
What we can do, some of them I can go over, like Dr. Cleveland talked about. Travel costs have increased significantly, especially for athletics. The counselors, they're seeing this greater need for students. And so that's why that has increased. For C&I professional development, the increase there is increased professional development. Most of the other departments are fairly flat. Like I said, school improvement has to do with mostly adding a couple of the programs in their budget, summer school being one of them. Again, I talked about IT. The big increase there is construction. And then for security, the Evolve system. Do you recall what the CTE was? The reduction for CTE. That's about the only one I was not come to my mind.
Yeah, I'm not super clear, and we can get back to you on that, Vice President Morgan. I can tell you from, with the CTE itself that, I think we were working really hard, during the legislative session to get some funding, built into the SEG formula. And, I think we're still at least a year away from really having some substantive discussions with legislators about funding, the SEG for CTE programs. But I can tell you that there was significant funding over the legislative session that is still below the line in a lot of grants as well. And so I know that we are very aggressive, and we have a lot of grant funding for CTE. We had, in addition to this year, we also have it planned for next year as well. I'm not exactly sure with the numbers on those grants, but we have the Innovation Zone grant. We have the House Bill Junior appropriation that comes along that helps us with those CTE programs. So even though you see a reduction in the department budget here for the operational fund, I can tell you that there is significant funding for the CTE program.
So part of it
overall.
is that we're receiving more grants, and so we don't need to put as much of our funds into that with all
That's
the
correct,
grants that are
President
coming.
Galbraith. But to your point, Vice President Morgan, we can tell you exactly where those reductions in this department budget can come from. I just don't have that right now.
Yeah, and to add to that, so what we'll do, you have access to this
Right.
sheet. And so in column I just typed in notes.
Right.
And so what we will do is we will go back and we will put that information in there. And then we could send that to you, share that with you. I mean, you already have access to it. And then you can see the specificity where those pluses and minuses come from.
Is the onboarding in the CNI budgets?
The class, yes.
Okay, I would like very much to give them just a chance just to say the board a little bit about, that's a significant increase, but what it's for, so that the board will have an idea of what actually that money is being used for. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike, for doing that.
Good evening, President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, Board. So part of the increase with the CNI across the board is that this last year, we increased the induction process for teachers into Rio Rancho Public Schools to a 5-day event to onboard our new teaching staff, to get them ready with HR, with curriculum in our classrooms, all of those things, IT, introduce them to people so that they were ready ahead of things, so that the hope is that if we onboard well, then they will stay with us. We'll have a higher retention rate, but that costs a great deal of money. Like we want to compensate them fairly in order to get them to join us, because they're often leaving other jobs or have to get daycare. And so we want to make sure that we have enough money on the table for them to join us for that.
We also moved our seminars to be done during the contract day. Previously, they had to complete seminars outside of the contract day. Again, with daycare and other coursework they're still completing, it became difficult for them to complete those seminars in a timely manner. And so we're trying to honor the profession and provide them the development that they need during their contract as well. So that was another increase.
Thank you.
It's last year we had 175 new teachers. I hope we never have 175 new teachers again, just because of that's a lot of new folks to bring into our district. You did quite a bit of follow-up this year and surveys. What was the feedback that you got from the folks who went through the induction this year? And we probably don't have that data yet on how many will be returning, but we know it's cost to recruit and it's a cost when we lose those folks. And so a desire to give them a good start so that they will stay with us. But I had a chance to visit with a few, but you visited with all of them. So can you kind of share what the feedback was for this year's effort? We just didn't quite have enough time to do everything we wanted.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that they felt like, and especially for our teachers that are coming to Rio Rancho that have experience teaching, right? This isn't just for people new to the profession. These are people coming into our district that they had never felt so supported coming in anywhere else they'd ever been, and felt more prepared to enter a classroom than they'd ever felt before. And it gave our brand new teachers the opportunity to make initial connections so they knew who some crucial touch points are in their buildings and in the district. Where do I go to get help when I need it?
Is there other professional development built into this budget as well?
Yeah, yes. So we do the 5 days, the facilitation of those 5 professional learning days. We also will have science instructional material review, which will be a K-12 adoption. It will be a big undertaking for the district, so sub for that. Implementation of the health and CTE instructional materials that are coming in. So anytime we need to have a sub for any of that, that's an added expense out of CNI.
And for elementary, we have the implementation of social studies since we're a year behind. And so that's an additional expenditure.
Thank you. I just wanted you to be aware of what that money was
Yeah,
going for,
yeah.
because that's a big increase.
Yeah.
But it's something we've been working on for a long time. We did on a smaller scale, hoping to be able to get everyone this year and to be able to pay them for that time. And and there's some other, we won't go into that, other professional development, I think that's part of that. But that was one of the bigger things that I wanted you to be aware of what that was about. And school improvement is same thing. I think some of that came from some of the out of school time money and for some of the K-12 plus, but it's for those kinds of activities. So thank you both. I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but
Thank you.
I did think it was important for the board to know where that money is going.
Appreciate
Yeah. A couple of other comments as well. You've heard as board members the discussions at the New Mexico School Boards Association about the importance of a fund balance and having it. And I remember the last time, I think it was 2009, the state decided districts didn't need fund balances, and they took them all and put them back up in Santa Fe. And of course, there was an outrage on the part of the districts. But my point being is that fund balances are necessary for times like this. And this one is the hardest one I think we've ever faced, because we've had this happen a couple of other times. We had it happen in the Great Recession. We had 2 other times I can remember, but they were always because the state's economy was going very badly. You were seeing a decline in oil and gas revenue, and state was out of money. This one is so frustrating because the state has plenty of money right now. We're not short at all. And I just can't help but think that when they put this budget together this year, there was just mistakes that were made. And some districts are doing just fine this year, particularly smaller and rural districts, which we've been trying to do better for a long time. So I think we've been more successful in terms of the budget. But this time it seems to have hit that whatever was done hit our medium-sized districts. And we have a lot of the children in the state in our medium-sized districts, Farmington, Rio Rancho, Las Cruces, Hobbs, and so forth. So where do we go next? I think this session, we've got to work very hard with our lobbyists and with our delegation, and we're meeting with our delegation on Friday to figure out what went wrong this year, because we shouldn't have had this. And when we talk to people in Santa Fe, they're shocked that they weren't anticipating this at all. They thought everybody was going to do as well as they did last year. So there has to be something that happened in the session. We have an extremely complex budget and formula. And when you start moving variables around, which happened this year, all of a sudden you're going to get unintended outcomes that can be serious for districts. And we're not alone here. I think we were hit the hardest from what I've heard. I think we were hit harder than anyone else. But you have you have districts all over the state, from the south to the north to the east to the west, and most of those were medium-sized districts. So our challenge this next year is we've got to get this fixed. We've got to figure out what went wrong and get it fixed. But we do need fund balances, and it's a good thing we have them, because when mistakes are made or things happen, you've got to have something to fall back on. And some of the districts that are facing shortfalls do not have much of a fund balance. They're really in a desperate situation right now. You mentioned nurses, and I just want to remind the board, just so that you'll have that piece of information. Our nurses are paid through Medicaid. They are not paid operationally. So we are very lucky to have our nurses. We're very lucky to have that reimbursement. And they add so much to our school programs. They're not generally paid out of the SEG. And there are a couple of others kind of like that as well, but just so you would have that information. And I think that was, I again want to emphasize, we're not anticipating a reduction in force of any of that, and people don't have to worry about that. And we do need to worry about getting this issue fixed. And we are going to have to be very vigilant about it's going to look like next year if we don't get some of those things resolved. But I am optimistic we can go back. Again, when we talk to people in Santa Fe, they're just very surprised. I mean, they're kind of shocked. And so this was an intentional thing, and it came up this short. I think that there were just some things that were happening. For me, the one that's the most difficult is that we went out at the state's request and extended our school year, and they funded it for us last year. And then they told us that the funding would be there, and they were pushing everybody to go that extra time. A lot of districts did not do it. That's where they came in with the mandatory 180-day. But now, in order to do that, it appears there wasn't enough money in the budget. So the districts who did the right thing, did what they were asked, moved forward, now find themselves in a more difficult situation. So it kind of falls under that let no good deed go unpunished, because that's kind of how it's feeling right now. But I think I am optimistic we can work with our folks in Santa Fe and see if we can't figure out what went wrong. Again, our position it would be better to push out the whole unit value now. If they come back with a shortfall, then to correct that shortfall in the session, rather than holding money back now that districts need. We don't need this money in March. We need money now, so before we have to make some of these reductions. And I don't know. I mean, it's just a very frustrating situation for us to be dealing with.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. And we kept talking declining enrollment, and I just want to put out there more as a comment is I'm really pleased with the school district right now looking into some innovative ways to keep our enrollment steady.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot of times that all schools, are schools of choice these days, as we have a lot of charters that are moving in. And so I'm really pleased that our school district's been looking at other districts and trying to figure out if there's ways, just some interesting ways that we can, what we can do in our elementary schools and such. And we're also looking at those behavior problems. So just thank you for looking at those things so that we can keep our students within our schools. So Mike, anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, one other. So we were looking at the CTE budget during some of the dialogue here. And so one of the things that we looked at is a reduction for next year in fixed assets. So essentially there's three major buckets where we purchase fixed assets for CTE. One is the bond fund. The other is special funds, or specifically grants from the state. And then the third is operational funds. So for the last few years, we have been purchasing equipment for the CTE building. And if you visited the building, you would see all those containers. I don't know how many, I've lost track, but there's 6+ containers out there with also a pretty large temporary structure. In those facilities are the equipment for that building. And we have been purchasing this over time. And this way, when the building is ready, we don't have to wait to purchase that equipment. We can simply move it from those storage facilities into the building. And so that reduction has to do with a lot of the equipment that we've already purchased.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else that needs to be presented before we go to anything? Everyone's good on questions?
Need a motion?
Yep, I do.
Okay. Make a motion that we approve the 2024-25 fiscal year budget.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, I second.
Okay. We have a motion by Gary Tripp and a second by Jeff Morgan. And JC, can you take a roll call vote for us, please?
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Miller,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We'll go now to the facility use agreement. So we'll turn it back over to Mike Baker.
President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board. So kind of hand in hand with the budget is a request to increase the facility use fees. And there's two requests in front of you. One is requesting a 10% increase in fees, and the other is requesting a 20% increase in fees. We expect to our FUA revenues probably about over $200,000 this year. One of our users resides in Independence High School. We will not be renewing their lease agreement. So we're anticipating approximately $200,000 in revenues next year without an increase. The difficulty with FUA is we want to make our facilities available to the community. They do pay taxes. They've been very favorable on our bond issues, but at the same token, we also want to ensure that we are covering our costs for the program. The basic cost for our program is we have a specialist that manages this program, that manages the users, and that collects the revenue. And we also have software. Just those two costs alone is over $60,000. So when you take the revenue minus that cost right there, and that doesn't include all the other costs associated with FUA, such as utility costs, wear and tear, just routine maintenance, for example. And it far exceeds, we don't have an exact number, but it does exceed the revenue that is taken in. The cost to maintain and the cost of construction, as you know, has increased significantly. And it has increased significantly in our district. Unfortunately, some of our fields, our athletic fields specifically at the middle schools, really are showing their wear and tear. And we really need to do something to manage those fields a little bit better and to get some more maintenance done on those fields. So with that, we are requesting an increase of either a 10% or 20% in fees. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Okay. Dr. Cleveland, did you want to add anything before we go to questions?
I just, as I said earlier, we hate to do this to increase the cost, but we can't afford to take out of our classroom budgets either. And so, and there is a lot of wear and tear right now on the facilities when people do use them. So I'm not very excited about it, but it looks like it's one of those economic necessities that we're just going to have to do to avoid going into our other budgets for some of the expenses that we're incurring as a result of groups renting and using our facilities.
All right. We'll go to questions. Jeff Morgan, do you want to start us off?
Mike, did you get a chance to compare some of these costs to some of the other districts throughout the state? And we pretty much in line with those guys?
We are in line. APS, their charges are a little bit different. We have like a day charge or a half a day charge where they charge by the hour. And so our rates are much more competitive in that regard because we give the half-day rate or the full-day rate where they charge by the hour. So like if you're doing tournaments or, you need to rent the facility for half a day, you actually get quote unquote a break on that when we compare our rates to APS, for example. And I know Angela compared the rates with Bernalillo Public Schools, and I believe that they were competitive there as well.
Yeah, because I don't want to lose the business. I don't want to kind of prices too far up to where somebody say, well, then I'll just go to this district or I'll just go here. That's the reason why I was asking. As long as we're in the same ballpark and it's convenient, if they're in this area and it's convenient for them, then we'll get the business. So that's what my concern was. Thanks.
Okay. Gary Tripp?
I think 20% is not unreasonable. I think it's fair. I think that people come to Rio Rancho Public Schools and they get a top-notch quality facility and then cleaned. But with some of the other thoughts of a bond support that we've always received and some of the other things we received, we probably need to maybe just take it one step 1 year at a time. So my opinion would be more of a 10%, just to show our community that we really appreciate them. But the last thing I would say to those that rent facilities, it's what I used to tell teachers, your classrooms is going to be as clean as you leave it. And so when you rent the facility, if you try to pick up after yourself, you're going to give our students and our teachers a really clean facility when they come back to it. So I'd be more in line with the 10% just to show our appreciation to the community on how much they support us.
I agree. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to comment on that. Most of the folks that use our facilities generally do a good job, but there have been some that have not, and they have not been invited back.
Good.
Beth?
Well, I was just wondering when you say it's comparable to other districts at the 10% or 20% level, or, I mean, because you're asking for either 10% or 20. So when you say we are comparable, answering Jeff's question, is it at the 10% level or the 20% level, or do you?
Originally, we were looking at 10%.
Okay.
And we were comparing it at a 10% increase. And then because of the budget situation and with my communication with the executive director for athletics and the need to put more money into the facilities, we thought, you know what, maybe we should go 20%. But when we compare ourselves specifically with APS, it's hard to compare because their fee structure is so different.
Right.
For example, when their janitorial, I should have said this, their janitorial fees are less than our janitorial fees, and which is very puzzling because we essentially just charge cost, and their janitorial fees are smaller for some reason. But we did compare the 10%, but we don't think the 20% is going to be out of line either.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, when was the last time you increased these fees?
Last year.
Last year. So you've kind of been doing it every year for a while, or?
No, I don't have that in my head as far as.
I know last year we did it, and I don't think we've done it before then since I've been on the board.
There was a
so.
pretty substantial.
That's right, it was.
And I don't recall when those years were, but we did increase it last year.
Was it 10% last year? Okay.
And there was talk then that we might have to do another increase. I remember that.
Thank you.
It's so hard. It's so hard because I really want our community to be able to come in. I was just talking to someone recently in the arts world who would love to do more things with our theaters and bringing in programs. And it's hard because our fees are high. I guess they are the same as others, but we want to bring in those, and it's not just for our schools, I think it benefits our students, to have those things come in, but just our community as well. And so I'm definitely more on board with the 10%. I hate to do it at all. I know that we've already received some public comment, and I know, and I've received many over the last year about these things. It's hard to understand, I think, when you're in the community and your children are in baseball and you want to, rent a facility, to understand why it's so high. But every time I go to Walmart and I spend hundreds of dollars on just things that I normally get, all the prices are just higher for everything, and and like you said, the wear and tear as I go into just sitting in, I was talking to Mike Baker about, and of course, some of these things are going to be fixed, but we're sitting in the Rio Rancho High School track, and there's holes in our track. There's different things, and so we have to remember that there's a lot of wear and tear that goes into our facilities. So while I hate it, I do see the need for it. I definitely would rather do a smaller increase, I think, this year than a higher increase. So, other comments or questions from the board, or Dr. Cleveland, or anyone else?
I know it is a difficult situation. I would add one thing. If it's exclusively for our students, then that's a different situation altogether. So I want to be sure you're aware of that. It's generally people are making money or they're having other kinds of events that do not really include our students or impact our students directly. So there is that differential. I want people to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Mike, real quick, we track how often we use these facilities. I believe that we
Great
do.
detail.
The other piece I want to mention is, to Amanda's point, if it looks like we start to see where these activities drop off, for an example, if there's an organization that's been coming to us for the last 10 years to use our facility, all of a sudden they see this increase, they decide not. Do we have somebody that says, hey man, look, these guys did not come with us this year because, and I'm asking that because if that starts to happen on a consistent basis, we do have the flexibility to go back to where we are right now. I just want to make sure that we're clear that this is not, concrete, that we don't have any flexibility with this. Because Amanda brings up a very good point. I like the 10%. I'm cool with that. But I do want to make sure that, man, as stuff start to drop off, we come back and look at revising this thing so that we don't lose any more customers at the end of the day.
And I'd be happy to communicate that with our specialists and keep an eye on that very thing.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're ready to vote. You good?
I think we are
Ready?
good.
Gary, go
I
ahead.
think you're
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the facility use agreement at a fee increase of 10%.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, aye. Second. Thanks.
Okay. We have a motion by Gary Tripp and a second by Jeff Morgan. And JC, will you take a roll call vote for us, please?
Vice President Morgan?
Yes.
Board Member Tripp?
Yes.
Board Member Miller?
Yes.
President Galbraith?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. All right, we're just going to keep on with Mike Baker. Now we'll look at our approval of the Clear Channel billboard license agreement.
President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, members of the school board. So we have been working for the better part of a year with Clear Channel on a license agreement. And so I just want to go over some of the basics with this agreement. But the proposal is to put up essentially a digital billboard right now at 3 different locations: Rio Rancho High School, our CTE facility off of 528, and right behind us here at the Student Support Center. And in exchange for Clear Channel to use our land, as you will, there is a fee structure. You have at the, I want to get the page number here. Page, what page? Last page, 18.
I was going to say, Claudia, just start going.
And so, as you can imagine, Clear Channel, they would invest quite a bit of capital to get the billboard up and running. And you've seen some of these Clear Channel billboards in Rio Rancho. It would be of a similar design. It's a good design. It doesn't look like, I don't want to use the term, but like a Klein's Corner thing on I-40. It is, pretty attractive. They would go at those 3 different locations. And so, of course, they want to get their capital in return and also make a profit. And we also would like to see some of those fees return to the district. And as we talk about budget, one of the things that I think we can do to help our budget situation is look for avenues of revenue other than the SCG. And this is a really good example. We talked about FUA, and now we're talking about Clear Channel. Is it going to handle our budget woes? No, but every little bit helps. And so in our first year, for a 2-sided digital billboard, we would see a bit over 20,000 in revenue. Now, one of the things that we had kind of difficulty was, okay, what is the projected increase? Because essentially because of inflation, what would be the increase? And so we looked at a 3% increase over the course of either 5 or 10 years. The difficulty we're projecting out there is we don't know what the inflationary rate is. So what we did is we put into the contract either a set fee or revenue share. So in this way, if inflation gets way out of hand, is that we're protected on our fees, that we would get essentially revenue sharing instead of the flat fee. And so that is the way the fee schedule is handled. Our first year of operation with the 3 sites, as Dr. Cleveland said in her opening report, we're looking at approximately 75,000. And so we anticipate that will increase every year. And then potentially we could be looking at a 4th site and maybe more sites in the future. But for now, we're looking at those 3 sites. The term of the agreement is essentially 2 5-year terms. The first 5 years there would be a renewal after 5 years, assuming that everything is working as we agree to in our agreement. And one of the things that we wanted to be very cautious about is what are the messages that are going to be on that billboard on our school sites. So in section 12 on page 4, you'll see advertising restrictions. For example, no obscenity, profanity, sexual material, gambling, tobacco, etc. No political campaigns, and those sort of things that tend to get people kind of crossways, and we don't want to associate that with the school district. So we spent a lot of time articulating that on page 4 and page 5. And really, I think those are the kind of the big items in this agreement. And like I said, myself, Lauren Hack, who just worked this agreement, fantastic, was fantastic while we were working through this agreement. Really got it very, very specific to make sure that it would be an agreement in our best interest. And so Lauren can speak to the specificities on the legal issues. And then Beth was part of our group as well, working with Clear Channel. Chris is in the audience representing Clear Channel as well. So with that, I think I will open it up for questions.
All right, Beth Miller, any questions, comments on that?
I have a question. I was just curious about the sign at the new tech high school. Where would that be in conjunction to where the sign is now out there by 528?
It will be just north of that sign.
Okay. I was just concerned.
Just north.
Okay.
Okay. Jeff Morgan?
So Mike, how many signs is it going to be again? 3?
3 signs.
And the 75,000 on the revenue is for all 3 or?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I guess I have to talk to Lauren. I know some of those categories you have on there, I know you don't want to get involved, but man, they pay a ton of money, Mike.
I'm with you.
I think you know
I'm
where I'm
with you.
going.
I know where you're
They
going.
pay a ton of money,
Yeah,
man. and we
I
could-
know where you're going.
Man, something like this could pay for another football field, another. Mike, we got to broaden the mind a little bit. So I'm just joking with you, man. You're okay.
I'm feeling concerned.
You're okay. Thanks. I appreciate the information.
All right, Gary.
I would just add one thing to that is there are state laws that regulate what you can put on school district
No.
property.
That's what I was
Okay,
getting
all
at.
right.
He and I already had this conversation. You know where I'm going with this. So I just thought maybe I'd give him a hard time. Thank you.
No questions, Gary. Okay. So with that, we'll consider a motion.
Board Member Jeff Morgan, I make a motion for the approval of Clear Channel Billboard License Agreement. Do I need to say the time, Mike, or Gary, Lauren, we good? Okay.
Board Member Beth Miller, I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Jeff Morgan and a second by Beth Miller. And will you take a roll call vote for us, please?
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Miller,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Awesome. Thank you. Did you want to say anything else, Dr. Cleveland?
I
on that
will
one?
just thank you for all the time and effort that went into getting this, because it took some time and effort to pull this together. I was actually thinking, how many billboards do we need for the deficit? But it'd be too many, so that would not work. But we do thank you for your time and effort, and look forward to working with you. And Mike and David and the staff worked, but also Lauren worked a lot of hours on getting this all pulled together. So thank you all.
Okay, so advanced planning, I'm just going to go through a couple of these just since we actually have a crazy month because it's May. So first up, we have a regular board meeting scheduled for the 13th. The finance committee was canceled for that day. I do have a question for the board members though, is that I do need to do a closed executive session for evaluation. Would you guys be able to still do an early, like a 4:00 meeting on the 13th, or is that a difficulty? Would that be okay if we did that? Just to get that done. Okay.
We
So,
will also need a short
Or on that same
executive
day?
session as well for legal matters.
okay. Yes. Okay. You're going to be traveling on that day. Okay. And then, so Lauren, we need to schedule another executive meeting on that one too. So maybe we'll talk and then we'll figure that out. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe we can keep the rest of the 13th shorter. That would be wonderful. I'm all for not too long of meetings. Okay. And then on the 14th will be the employee recognition dinner. Please see, I think it's in our emails and we have a calendar invite on that one. Do you want to talk about Claudia? Anything you need to let us know on that, the board on the? Okay. Okay. Is that all in that calendar invite? I haven't actually. Okay. So we'll make sure that we take a look at that. And then we have all the graduations coming up. So the 17th is Cyber's graduation. Cleveland's on the 20th. Also on the 20th is Independence. And then on the 21st is Rio Rancho High School's graduation. And then also if you're going to that law conference, please make sure you let JC know. Anyway, all of these things coming up. Anything on the calendar? Anyone questions on the calendar? Good. Okay. All right. So with that, our meeting's adjourned tonight. Thank you.